Mrs. Fee?
Here.
Mr. Gerose?
Here.
Mr. Croner?
Here.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Excused?
Mrs. Randall?
Here.
Mrs. Rios?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items this evening. Is there anyone present who would like to comment on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move to approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Randall. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gerose. Is there any board discussion on the consent agenda? Is there any community comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mrs. Galante, please call the roll.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerose?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. We'll move to our next item, a report from Student Services on non-resident enrollment recommendations. Thank you, Mrs. Kwiatkowski.
I'm going to start just by saying that our non-resident program recommendations that I'll be sharing tonight are the same recommendations that we have had for the past several years. So there's no changes to the recommendations, but I'll go through them. First of all, for Chapter 220, that's one of our non-resident programs that Wauwatosa School District participates in. Currently, we are over 30% minority student population, so we are not eligible to take any additional Chapter 220 students for the 2014-15 school year. If you look at our current Chapter 220 enrollment, as you can see, we have not been eligible for Chapter 220 for the previous 4 years, or 3 years. This will be the 4th year in a row that we're ineligible. And right now, our Chapter 220 enrollment is, for the first time, under 100 students. We're actually at 99 students that participate in Chapter 220. For open enrollment, we're recommending that we determine space available based on class sizes of 18 students in kindergarten, K4 and K5, and then a class size of 20 students, 1st grade through 5th grade, and then 23 in core academic subjects at the secondary level. This is our projected open enrollment numbers for next year. Obviously, JK is always the unknown. If you look at what we currently have as far as open enrollment students, right now we have 1,023 open enrollment students. So it would be 1,023, assuming all those stay, plus the JK enrollment, kind of an estimate. We also, in the past recent years, the Department of Public Instruction has advised school districts to also come up with a statement for determining space available in special education. So we use caseload assignments of 1 FTE to 5 students and 1 speech pathologist to 15 students, and that's based on the FTEs assigned to a building. So if there's 2 special education teachers in a building, we would look at 10 students as the maximum, or as the case. Those are the numbers.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any board questions? Mrs. Randall?
When I was looking at this and I was thinking about the last couple of years and the fact that we're doing an audit in student services, the question of adequate resources comes up, and I think it's been a while, and I wondered if anybody else on the board would be interested in getting more data on what resources are going to open enrollment, whether it be administrative time, whether it be kids that come without identified needs and then are identified once they're here? Do we have data on that we could maybe look at?
We certainly can pull that kind of data.
Okay.
You know, as far as the whole referral, special education evaluation process, I think Wauwatosa is really good at that. And many of our students in open enrollment are coming from Milwaukee Public Schools. And we know that sometimes Milwaukee Public Schools haven't been as successful in referring and identifying students with disabilities. So we do have some students that come to us without IEPs and then end up being serviced through an IEP. And I know that there are some students and families that have learned to game the system just like they always do. So there are some situations where there are families that have pulled their students out of special education, signed them out, which they legally can, apply for open enrollment, get in through open enrollment, and then put that back in place. So we are starting to look at that. One of the things, actually, just today I asked my administrative assistant who came back this week to look at the data, just comparing what's the percentage of our resident and non-resident students as far as in special education is a proportion or not. So that's some of the data that we're currently looking at.
I kind of hate to do that because, I don't want to create a perception. But we've talked about this in the past, and there have been some kind of upfront situations going on. So it seems like it might be a good idea to look at the data. So I don't know if the other members of the board are interested in hearing that, or I piggyback on that, Mike.
Go ahead.
Yes, I think you bring up a really good point. I think Shorewood did a study of this, looking at when open enrollment students come into the district and then how much resources were used. And the later they came into the district, the more resources were used, and then it actually was ending up costing the district money. And that, I think and I don't have the exact information, but some districts then limit when they enter into the district, like at the younger levels, because then they just assimilate better to the culture of the district and don't end up spending. So do we have, and I've never gone through this, so this is my first time looking at this, can you explain a little bit about, you had a slide up and it went by a little quick, so I didn't. That had the
recommendations.
Yes, and so is it basically opened at any grade level for open enrollment? Do we have anything that says?
When you look at this, it says 23 at the core academic subjects at the secondary level. What I will tell you is we staff at 25.5 and 26.5 at the middle and high school, respectively. So, in essence, the way we staff, we don't have space for kids in the secondary level to come in. So, the only way is to come in through JK through 5th grade.
And so that's been the way it's been going for the last, at
least 9 years. I'm not
but
sure.
It's been they're
prior
only
to
coming
that.
in JK through 5th grade.
Outside of 1 year where we accepted 270 students additionally, and then also at the for special education, the caseloads that we have here, we don't have room for special education students. So basically, we don't accept students with special education needs. We don't have space for unless something changes dramatically in our district, which I can't envision that happening. And the same thing with the secondary level. It just wouldn't happen, that we would have open space.
And Carmela, this has been discussed at the board level more than once, but it's been a couple years.
Okay.
That's kind of why I was bringing it up tonight, to see where we're at with that.
Well, I think that's a great point. I think we need to know what the costs are and what we're getting.
I think
At
there's
least an idea.
another point to remember is, I believe it was 4 years ago, we had Baker Tilly do a comprehensive study of open enrollment in the district, and I certainly can share those results with you. And it really talked about filling open seats and not creating additional sections, which we don't do at the elementary level. But and they looked at all those costs in that, taken into account. But I think we've seen some changes in the past couple of years where I think Ms. Kwiatkowski mentioned that we're getting more. I don't know if it's people gaming the system, but we seem to get a larger number of students that are coming in and then are qualifying once they get in. And I think it is a good time to start looking at it again and see whether or not it's taxing the system more so than what we're gaining.
Any report of service level provided to non-residents should have attached to it that economic study so that people get the full context of all the analysis we have available to us when they're doing their personal assessments. Okay. Any other board comment or question? So this will come for vote in the next meeting?
Yeah, and we'll provide that information prior to that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any community comment or question on this topic? All right, thank you, Mrs. Pinkowski.
You're welcome.
And next we have the academic resources report from our high school principals, Mr. Frank Clarko and Mr. Nick Hughes. And please, will you introduce your
I certainly.
panel? Apparently, there's a panel that's come with you. We neglected to provide chairs at the table for
Brought
everyone.
the folks that are on the front lines.
There you go.
Right.
Doing it every day.
Good
You can just
idea.
go to the front
We
slide.
regret we didn't provide better seating.
There you go.
That I'm confident, yes, this is probably true.
Tonight, we have Mr. Clarko from Wauwatosa West and Mr. Hughes from Wauwatosa East, and you can introduce Kurt and Kelly and Ben.
Hi.
And Ben has made it. If you want to introduce your teams that are here tonight to talk about the academic resource centers.
Sure. Ben Veit, who has actually been in our alt ed program for about 8 or 9 years now, I would say, right? Between that at least. And then more recently taken on what we used to call it at West CSP and now the ARC. And then also Mr. Byers, assistant principal, who's kind of overseeing the changes in the ARC, are here from West tonight.
Sure, and behind me are Kurt Schultz and Kelly Roberts. Both have been involved in what was formerly called Schools in a School at Wauwatosa East, the alternative education program, which this year is the Academic Resource Center. They are the two leaders of the houses that will be described later.
Start just by talking about the district development plan. In 2012-2013, one of the projects listed in the district development plan was that secondary administrators will work collaboratively to restructure current alternative education opportunities to align with an RTI model to better address the academic and behavioral needs of struggling students while ensuring access to the district curriculum and equity of opportunities for all students. So that's where some of the changes came from, was from one of the projects listed in the district development plan. Over the past year, we've kind of been transitioning some of our service delivery. West started a little bit earlier. East has been working on it last year and this year. But during that transition, we looked at eliminating programs where students were removed from the general education curriculum, and then develop a flexible system of support and interventions for students in study halls needing additional teaching or help with class materials and core content area. So the alternative school here was also part of that. So an academic resource center, why? Why would we do this? Well, first of all, one of the advantages of the academic resource center is it ensures access to the district curriculum. It eliminates those replacement curriculums that were being used in the alternative school in the alternative school here, as well as in some of the school within a school self-contained programs, where they were using a curriculum that was not necessarily aligned with the district standards. Another reason why is you're able to service more students. When you have a program, there is only a certain amount of students that can be serviced. So in the alternative school here, there were 15 seats or 20 seats available, and once those 20 seats were full, regardless of whether or not you needed the service, you didn't get it if the seats were full. So it's a timely service versus a wait to fail model. In my own experiences, working with the alternative schools as well as working with students across the district, there would be times where I'd be talking to either a middle school student or a freshman talking about wanting to go to the alternative school. So they were kind of setting pathways to get them into alternative programs. Another reason why it's a resource available to all students versus a segregated placement for limited numbers. I kind of explained that a little bit earlier. And really the Academic Resource Center, the biggest why is it supports the goals that we have for a district. When we talk about WKCE scores, MAP scores, ACT scores, and AP courses, the best way to get students there is through our curriculum that we have for all students. The who for the Academic Resource Centers, it's available to all students in the building. Some of the students are assigned on a regular basis or as needed, so it's part of their regular schedule. For some students are assigned based on their IEP needs. This is probably what gets me most excited about our Academic Resource Center is how it's impacted our special education service delivery at the high school level. Often for students in high school that have IEPs, it's kind of a standard program model where most of the students will have a study skills class as a part of their schedule. And that study skills class is their special education class. So in most traditional special education programs, and this isn't unique to Wauwatosa, this is kind of universal across the United States, once students get to high school, they would have an assigned study skills, sometimes each semester for 4 years. So when you think about that in credits, that's 4 credits of study skills where we really didn't know what was happening. It's a little bit of this for some students, it's a little bit of that for other students. It's time for them to see their teacher, but the question is that really what they need? And is that really, when we talk about least restrictive environment and individualized educational program, it's really not an individualized program. The Academic Resource Center has really allowed our special education teachers and our special education students to get services based on what they need because there's special education services in those centers. So students can access it. And, you know, coincidentally, earlier this year, I happened to bump into a student at East, and he said, I'm like, hey, where are you off to? Because it was kind of between classes, and you always ask that when you see this, you know, a student in the hallway. Where are you off to and what are you up to? He's like, oh, I'm just going to the Academic Resource Center. I get to go there whenever I need help. It's the place I go. And the student was excited about it. So our students with disabilities look like their typical peers, and that's what we want them to look like. They're not being sent to study hill. So I get a little passionate and excited about it, but it really is a big shift for our students with disabilities. And then classroom teachers can actually assign students to the Academic Resource Center. And then the what of the ARC. It's assistance from staff members assigned full-time to the ARC. That's who's here with us tonight. There's also assistance available from core content area teachers assigned each period. And then finally, assistance from special education teachers, because we have special education teachers assigned to the ARC as well. I'm going to turn it over now to East and West, because their programs are a little bit different. They can talk a little bit about what they have going on in their respective buildings. I'll move out of the way.
So we thought we might give you a little history about how it started at West and then how we've kind of changed the structure. 6 years ago at West, a bunch of teachers got together. They were worried about students that were failing and not being able to get help either before school or after school. So at that time, teachers taught 5 out of 7. Then they had 1 prep period. Then they had something called cooperative study period. And that cooperative study period was supposed to be teachers meeting with students. But there was really no way to connect with students on a regular basis. So the teachers at West got together and said, and this was really just a teacher-led movement, well, on that CSP time, why don't we just meet in the library? The kids will know where we are. And actually, Mr. Veit was the one who kind of then set up that structure in the library. But it just wasn't, it was really being looked at for struggling learners only. 3 years ago, we saw an article in the paper, one of the papers that talked about this school in Marshfield up in Columbus, and they talked about how they reduced by 40% the number of failures. So a bunch of us went up there and we took a look at what they were doing, and we brought back some of those structures. And I think Mr. Hughes is going to talk a little bit more about that.
Right, some of the revamping of alt ed came from, at a district level, the alternative ed review that was done a few years ago, where all the programs across the district were looked at. The school within a school program, the PASS, the alternative ed program here, as the Guido program was going in. There was an audit that was done just to talk about the resources and the number of students and what services we were getting from alternative ed. And that sort of started from central office, from Fisher, and also within the buildings, an idea that we need to somehow service more students who are struggling. So through the alt ed review, we started to look at the services offered within the individual buildings. And at East High School, we talked about how we could take school within a school as it was structured at that time and move it forward and attempt to service more students. So along the way, as we looked at other alternative ed measures, we've seen other programs come into play, like math emphasis and academic literacy support at both high schools, which are intended to support students in very particular content areas, math and literacy. And then with the alt ed review, a lot of our work in the past couple of years at East has focused on redoing school within a school. We did, as Frank said, visit Marshfield. Dr. Ertl took a trip up there with Mr. Clarko and Mr. Hoyne and Mr. Oliver, and I also took a group up in the minivan myself to Marshfield and back in a day, which is a great trip in one day, just to look at what they were doing within their academic resource centers. Because, like Mr. Clarko said, the percentage of reduction in Fs was something that stood out to us. So the goal, again, was to try and find a better way to support more of our learners. For me individually, when I think about what the ARC has done this year, I think my definition of a struggling learner has changed greatly because struggling learners can be struggling just for a single concept or a single assignment. And I think at times we've always thought that struggling learners are kids that are just the ones getting consistently Ds or Fs. I look at my own son, and he struggles in AP Calc. He can go to the ARC and get help, goes to the ARC and gets help, still sees his teacher. He, in my mind, is a struggling learner with that particular subject. So now we have a place, whether it's a student in AP Psych who might be struggling, AP Stats, Chemistry, Biology, high-level regular classes that can go and get help from teachers. So for me, one of my aha moments was just realizing struggling learners can apply to a lot of kids, and reducing and eliminating the stigma that has gone along with being part of a particular program or sent to a part of the building to get services where you might stand out and be viewed as differently.
Yeah, we've seen that also at West. Early on, we have an advisory period every day for 10 minutes, and then on Wednesday we have a 32-minute advisory. And early on, our committee for advisory did an entire period on all the reasons why you can go to the ARC, as we call it. And so now what we're seeing is students that, we have special ed students in there, we have some of our 4.0 students in there, and there's not that stigma anymore. So kids in the past always kind of knew, oh, I'm going into this because I'm a struggling learner. Well, now they're kind of excited to go because they see, you know, whoever is going to be our valedictorian going in there as well. So that's been a great change for this year. And I wanted to speak then also, I think later on there's a slide about it, but I really didn't want to forget this. From 2 years ago, when we really started, I think, at West to do some great things in the ARC, to last year, we actually reduced our Fs by 37% in 1 year. And although we think some of that is doing our advisory and doing PBIS and just everything involved, we do think that the ARC has been the #1 reason how we've reduced those. So I think at this time, we'll bring up our teachers.
Yep, we're going to bring up Kurt and Kelly and also Ben to talk a little bit about the items that are listed there, the structure and location, staffing, resources, services, a little bit about the users, and also the data we hope to collect as the year goes on. So, I can click through PowerPoint.
Okay.
Do you want to pass these? Do you want to talk about yours first? Hi. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what do we have next here? This is from East Academic Center. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's unique at East, because I think they've kind of covered the why and the who. At East, we have 2 rooms. They're adjacent rooms. They're in a nice location. They're right across from guidance, across from the Career Center. We have 2 full-time coordinators. One room is a math and science room, and one room focuses on pretty much everything else, English and social studies, and Spanish, and health, and family consumer ed. They're all pretty much thrown in that other room. We also have an 8th-hour study hall that is staffed by a student supervisor. So it's not necessarily a time for academic assistance, but it is a time where students could still make up a test, could still finish up an assignment. And that has picked up as the year's gone on. Last week there were 57 students that used the 8th-hour study hall. And then we also have, during lunch, our Spanish teachers are each assigned, one teacher is 5A and one is 5B. So if a kid has questions during Spanish, that they can get in and get help from the Spanish teacher. As far as resources, we have, we have a Chromebook cart with 30 units. We have 8 desktop computers, smart boards with projection units, and we also use Kurzweil, which is a software. You use that also, don't you? Use that yet? Not yet. It's a software that can read the test to the kids, so we can download it ahead of time. For a student who understands the material, but especially based on their IEP needs, still has struggles with reading, so they can hook up with the headphones. It reads. It's a nice software because if you get halfway through it and you want to go back, you just it's a simple click and it continues to read. We like it. We've listed all the services. Again, I think our greatest strength is probably that there is already no stigma to this. It's an AP student is sitting next to a special ed student. It's as simple as using the library. I'm going to the library for help. I'm going to the ARC for help. It's just part of the day. The philosophy that we've kind of stood by is that every student should walk out thinking that was a place I belonged, that was a place that I felt welcome, and every student should walk out thinking that was a good use of my time. We don't ever want anyone to walk out saying that was a waste of my time. So those are kind of our philosophies. You want to talk about our numbers?
Yeah. In the little East packet that we passed out to you, the second sheet is a data spreadsheet that we're continuing to work on. Obviously, new program especially, we want to come up with some information, get some numbers to look at. I think there's a lot of numbers there. We're looking for, topic breakdown with the different courses. We're looking for our breakdown with the students. I think the big focus from that spreadsheet is, one, the total number of students that we're able to service. Again, one of the guidelines that we're looking for with the reset here was servicing more students. Especially after our inaugural weeks when we got started, the last 4 weeks between, again, our drop-in students who either come in on their own or a teacher recommends they come in, and the students that we are assigned on a day that we have all the time for their study hall. We've been servicing over 400 students on a weekly basis in the ARC. So again, servicing more students. The idea of flexibility was one of the things that the administrators were looking for. And I think we've got a couple items in here. Again, we asked the students when they come in, why are you coming in? You just need help with homework, you're working on an assignment, or are you coming in to take a test or quiz? At least at East, the testing was something we talked about, incorporating early on, and we weren't really sure about it. We threw it into the mix when we kicked off the program in September, and I think if you look at our testing and our quizzing column there, we're getting, upwards, 130 to 175 students utilizing the ARC to retake tests, make up quizzes or tests in us. Okay. Again, I think with the, with our grading and things like that, there are a lot of retakes that students are offered the opportunity to take, and I think having us work on that in the ARC kind of frees up, gives the students more flexibility with their time, and kind of frees things up for the teacher's time also. The other item to possibly look at, I said we've got students that are assigned. Basically, administration looked at the beginning of the year at students coming in and some of the students who have been at East. Should this student maybe be in the ARC all the time instead of, having their study hall down in the reader room? So we have students that are in there. If you look at that far right-hand column, kind of a base of, 60 to 70 students, the numbers jumped. The numbers jumped again in those last 2 weeks because of the flexibility of the program. Progress reports went out after those first 67 weeks, and teachers talked with students, and those students had a general open study hall, and the teacher had the flexibility to say, Billy, you're struggling a little bit. We want a little more dedicated study hall. We're going to have you go to the ARC next week instead of going down to the Raider room or where your other study hall is. So again, some more flexibility, I guess, to help the students, as well as giving the teachers other options to work with those students.
All right. Speaking at the west location, we also have 2 rooms that are dedicated to the ARC, but we have more than that. We don't have them specifically delineated as math and science and English or literacy and social studies, but we kind of go with the hour and the number of kids and the needs. We kind of have the flexibility to do that. We also have a smaller room right around the side, and everything is fairly centrally located right off of our library. We also have access to an upper gym and on occasion the Steiner Center. So we've got a great deal of flexibilities with space in terms of what we need to do actually each hour, each day, and can kind of juggle things based on student need. I guess going to our philosophy right away, it kind of centers around the statement that we're there to help the students do whatever they need to do well. And so really what they need is what drives what goes on a daily and hourly basis. In fact, we have them fill out goal sheets each day, so they're setting a target for the hour, a little time toward the end of the hour to reflect on that, and then definitely connect with a teacher if they haven't already during the course of the hour as they do their work. Resource-wise, also have the luxury of having 20 Chromebooks in a cart. We also have another 2 separate areas, one with 8 computers and the other with 4 computers. And again, being right off the library, there's also some flexibility there depending on other classes' use of that location. The type of services, again, we have varied with assigned students as well as drop-in. And when I say drop-in, they can be coming from a study hall, but they also can be coming from another class. We've certainly tried to encourage that if a student is, for example, behind or not having, needing a little more assistance, understanding a concept, the teachers of every class know that their colleagues are in the ARC and probably able to help them and maybe give them a little bit more direct attention even during that class period. So besides any type of study hall or lunchtime. As a handout that I kind of gave to you, or we gave to you, kind of numbers break down there, and you see that we have 45 special ed students. We also have students that are enrolled in what we call past transitions, which has been around for a long time and I've been associated with for a long time. And then obviously the students that drop in, and then the testing center. The testing center is kind of growing into an entity that could probably support itself. Certainly did see a spike as we neared the end of the first quarter. However, the first quarter is gone, and we had plenty of interest in retakes and makeups and things like that with the testing center element of it as well. We've also been able to start to really bring in some of the RTI discussions and bring in students and give them opportunities as part of those interventions to start to kind of look at what some of the possibilities might be in that regard. And so those are just a number of the many ways in which that is happening. In terms of staffing, again, we are staffed by a group of core teachers and a special education teacher every hour. We kind of have them rotate in different spots so they get to kind of work with the different students wherever they might end up each of those hours. And that's really kind of been one of the neat things that's kind of come out of that. If you were to walk into this area, you would not see the labels. You would see regular ed teachers working with special ed teachers working with regular ed. You'd see some English teachers trying to help somebody with algebra. So it's really been a kind of a nice setting where the teachers can kind of rely on each other. We can kind of try our hand on maybe something that isn't our forte, and then maybe default back to somebody who has it more as a strength. In the many years that we've kind of done something to this effect, and I've kind of said this often, I think by far this is our first or our best go at it, and I think it really has some promise. And it's doing some nice things already, and I think the flexibility of it and the resources that are available there, both human and technological, really give us some great opportunities.
So I think Mr. Hughes and I, before there's any questions, we were just going to talk about some of the challenges moving forward, and maybe moving forward, the help or support we're going to need from the school board. And I think I failed to mention, I think it's really important, when we talked about a 30% drop in failures, that was with a switch to grading for learning. Where in the past, many students in many classes were getting 30% of their grade as an A just for participating and handing in their homework. These are much more authentic grades that the students have earned. So had we not switched, I think the failures would have went down even more. But again, we're more interested in the students learning, and we think that's happening. So our challenges, Mr. Hughes, I'll let you start.
I think if you look at the data for East, the number of students that are coming in to get math help is largest on that chart. And that seems to be a subject, despite the other program, Math Emphasis, available for algebra and geometry, where students are having a lot of help and need a lot of help with homework or concepts there. So that is one area that our math teachers, I think, are really taxed. And I didn't give to you a copy of the teacher schedule where teachers are assigned. And we built a student schedule first. So there are periods where at East, I may not have a science or a math teacher available a particular hour. So that also complicates it a little bit, because really I need 8 teachers to assign across the periods, the 5th hour being 2 of them, 5A and 5B, and hope that somebody is available every hour of the day. And this year it didn't work out. I don't have a math teacher second hour? There's a particular hour.
Yeah, second hour and 6th hour.
Second and sixth, and I don't have a science teacher first hour that are not teaching, or it would create some sort of 6 in a row or some other assignment. So some of it is the ability to get somebody in there every hour based on some other schedule parameters.
And so one of the things we meet with Dr. Ertl once a month, the high school principals, and he always asks us, well, what do you need? And we've asked that we look at getting a math tutor, a full-time math tutor in the ARC at both schools, because that is our greatest area of need. And then moving forward, we talked about next year making sure that we actually schedule, not just the student schedule first, but actually look at coding where the teachers are put into the ARC at a certain hour, so we don't run into the same problem that we have this year at both East and West, where you don't always have a math or a science teacher in the ARC.
Because there also will be some instances where, for instance, 7th hour study hall at East, for whatever reason this year is huge. 11-12 study hall is about 170 students. And that is a big group if they want to come and get help 7th hour. And fortunately, we have teachers from all the areas of the ARC available. But if I had 170 students available first hour and I didn't have a science teacher, that presents a bit of a problem. So some of it also depends upon where our students fall out. So building that teacher support schedule, a little bit of a shake and roll of the dice this year and trying to best guess where people are going to be. But it is something I know that I'm going to get better at as the year goes on.
We also want to look to expand it before and after school and actually have people in there that I know at East right now they just have an 8th hour where kids can come and find a quiet place to study or take a test. We really want to have from 7 to 8 o'clock and from 3:10 to 4 o'clock teachers in there, or at least paraprofessionals that can help tutor students.
Because one of the basis for the system is it's built on students having the study hall. Or coming in during their lunch, but then we're asking them to eat quickly and get help during lunch. Without a student having study hall, there's not a built-in spot, the way it's set right now, to get help in the ARC. We have started to drop students from a class they're not performing well in and place them in the ARC. Because if we realize you're failing 5 classes and have 7, all of your classes full, maybe we should drop one to get you the support to do well in other classes. At times that creates another hard discussion. We might be asking them to drop something they're passing, because we may say that passing math class is more important than something else. So part of that drop a class and add in the support is also something that's ongoing.
And then I think the other thing that has been challenging for us, I know at West, during the first 3 weeks of the school year, teachers are basically now teaching 6 out of 7 periods a day, and some of them go 1st through 6th hour, and so that's been a struggle for them. And so we went on a rotating basis where 1 day a week they don't have to go to the ARC, 1 day a week they get an extra prep. And so, moving forward, I don't know if we look at doing more of a rotation or what, but going 6 out of 7 every day is pretty tough.
And I think that's the feedback that we're getting from staff at East as well, is the work in the ARC, depending upon the number of students that are there and what you teach, can be very, very demanding. You can be busy for that 52 minutes, and being a 6 contact with kids takes some prep time away. It takes some correction time away, acknowledging that there's never enough time in the day to prep, there's never enough time in the day to grade all your papers, but it seems like the day is a little bit more rushed. One of the other pieces that have come into play with that 6th assignment, we have fewer internal colleague subs, because people are less willing to give up their 1 period without students to sub on a need or an emergency basis. So that's another offshoot of this. So we have had a lot of discussions about getting more subs into our sub pool, because our internal group now, we've filled another part of their day.
So I know we ended here with the challenges, but overall, we've been really pleased. Again, 37% decrease in failures in a year. And just, I have a list from special ed teachers of how happy they are that we now have our special ed students in there. They're with the regular ed students being taught by regular ed teachers who are the experts in their field. So that's been just a huge win for us.
And I think making the location neutral, someplace that students go that is new to them, someplace that teachers go that is not their classroom, creates an equal learning surface, where we used to send students out to a classroom, go see Mr. Smith in social studies. Well, he's not my teacher, and now I have to go find him in room 254 somewhere down a hallway. It was hard to make that connection. We now can say, and we know consistently, 3rd hour, what 4 or 5 or 6 teachers are going to be there. Go see so-and-so, 3rd hour in the ARC. They're going to come from their classroom, you're going to go there. It's neutral territory, and it just makes that relationship building between teacher and student a little bit easier. And we also have students getting exposed to more and more of our teachers. They may see a teacher in the ARC that they're going to have in a year or 2, and be able to formulate their own opinions about them and know who they are ahead of time, and not live maybe with the rumor mill about, oh, I heard he's really hard or not very nice or whatever. So it's more exposure to some of our other teachers.
Okay, well, thank you. I need to say that I very much value and appreciate the people from the classroom buildings doing the presentations. It just seems so much more, at least to me, more compelling when the people who are day-to-day interacting directly with the students come to the board and let us know how things are going and what you need. So thank you very much. Is there any board comment or question?
Go ahead, Mary Jo.
I look to the right first for a change, so you take your chance.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
All right, I'll start.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. And, I want to say, to piggyback on what Mike said, the honesty at which you're presenting both the positives and the challenges, I think is really important, because if you weren't putting the challenges, then it wouldn't be as genuine. So I don't think of that as a bad thing. That's just the honesty of getting a program going. So it's obvious that this is a needed resource for students, but it also seems very apparent, and not just from what I'm hearing from you now, that it is taxing, because it seems like a lot of the burden is being put on the core teachers, and maybe more heavily math and science and the contents that require a lot of support. So I think that's what is good to acknowledge, and see if we can find resources for, the one comment you said about having a full-time math tutor, and that I think would be something really valuable, because my main concern is that extra burden that it's putting on already teachers that are working very hard. And, I'm obviously speaking from personal experience, but, that's time where science teachers aren't setting up, can't be in their rooms to set up the labs to, it's a lot. It's a lot to ask. So it's needed, but it's also a lot to ask. So I think the discussion now is how can we allocate more resources and do more of a rotation, like what you were saying, so that it's not an everyday demand. I know, Phil, you commented before that at East, they were going to do a rotation. Has that started?
No, I think there's been discussions about it, but I think, this goes back, I think one of the two of you mentioned that previously there was a CSP period. So by contract, there was a requirement of 6 of 7 periods being taken, but CSP was, as I mentioned too, was almost impossible to implement in an effective way that was going to be productive for kids. Earlier this year, when I mentioned that we weren't going to be moving forward with an 8-period day at the high school level, this right here is the reason why. And this is in particular the main reason why. Because if we went forward with it, it would have been 7 of 8 periods. And with an additional 30-some students to be responsible for each semester. So I think that's important to remember. That's, in particular, the big reason why we backed off of that. But also looking to add resources, as they mentioned, that discussion about adding a math tutor, which would give that help and give that support. I know it's a big change. One of the things that goes back to the trip to Marshfield, for me, was, and not the discussion from the principal, who was obviously very proud of the program and very fond of it, but going into the Academic Resource Center and talking to the teachers, and I remember one in particular, Mr. Gadel, mentioned that, because I asked about the load, because they had an 8-period day and it was 7 of 8. And his comment was, yes, you know what, it's 7 of 8, and we were angry, and we hated it when we started. But when we see the results and we see what the kids are getting from it, we bought in, and we understand it's extra. We're able to we manage our time, we're able to get things done. And I know this is a gentleman that was doing a lot outside of the school day too. But all that being said, this is Wauwatosa. We recognize what our teachers are feeling, and I think we're going to focus on getting the kids the services they need and try to address those concerns too. They've been shared with me at East High School when we had an opportunity to talk with teachers when I went over there too. So it's something that is certainly in consideration and under a lot of discussion as well.
And Mrs. Rios, the allied arts or elective teachers are helping out as well.
Okay.
Some of them do just the structured study hall, where they're not up in the arc, but they're still helping us by taking a load of kids and working with them. One on, I don't know, at East, they're a lot bigger than ours. Ours are only about 10 or 12. Some of them are only 3 or 4 students. And if they're not doing that study hall, they do go up to the arc. I've seen Mrs. Botsford up there, ed teacher, helping kids with algebra. So if they're every hour, every teacher's going.
Yeah.
Like Mr. Glarko said, our allied arts teachers are supervising the 9-10 study halls. Depending upon numbers, we may divide them up, 9th grade only, 10th grade only. At progress reports and quarter grades, we'll take 11th and 12th graders who may not be doing well academically out of the Raider room and put them in the 9-10 study halls. So those become populated as well. So all of our teachers, if you are not a traveling teacher and are full-time, have an additional 6th assignment. For East High School, it's a year-long study hall assignment for if you're an allied arts teacher as well.
Okay, can we rotate around a little and we'll come back to you? Is that okay?
No, that's fine.
Mr. Joes, anything? Mrs. Randall?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all being here. I just want to clarify now, it's Mrs. Roberts, right? Mm-hmm. And Mr. Schultz? Okay. And Mr. Veet? Okay. So you are the full-time staff in their respective buildings? Okay. And are you general ed background, or what, or special, you were, Mr. Veep, special needs, right?
Well, I have a broad field social science
Okay,
major, and that's my licensure, but I'm also licensed alternative ed.
okay. And so,
I have an undergrad and a master's in special ed
okay,
and also alternative ed.
okay,
We alternative ed background also, but
okay,
also the room, school within a school, I was the math science person for school.
okay.
But we did in the previous
Mhm.
program, coordinate through the two.
Okay, so we do have on a full-time basis some pretty extensive resources among you. Thank you for doing that. So in Marshfield, it's just typical that staff does 6 out of 7 hours,
7 out of 8
7 out of 8.
in Marshfield.
Is
And
that,
every student is assigned to a study hall, though,
okay,
so that it's a little bit easier for them to pull students.
okay. In other districts, do we know how this is working?
Yeah, we went down to Hershey, Illinois, and talked with them, right? Was it Hershey
Yes,
or
Hershey.
chocolate bar? I don't know.
That's
But,
Pennsylvania.
it was
I don't think you were there.
It was working really well there.
Yeah,
It seems like the places that we have gone have had better facilities, like done a lot of makeovers to make it almost like its own entity.
yeah.
So
Well,
we're not
and
quite there yet.
Full disclosure, the principal from Marshfield took the Academic Resource Center with him down to Hershey. So he was one of the people who brought that in, his idea, and he took it down there. So
Okay,
he sort of
yeah,
retired from Marshfield and went down there.
yeah. So what time frame and what kind of results are you going to need to invest more in this? Maybe, I don't know. Or what are you doing to build that?
Well, I think some of the data we're going to gather, we'll be looking at failure rates. We'll be looking at, or we'll call it success rates. How about that?
Yeah,
We'll look at the success rates of students that are in the ARC. And being a first year at East with that structure, we may have to make some more general comparisons and not necessarily apples to apples, where this would be that first year to try and get some of that. But overall, we should be able to compare students that are assigned to the ARC this year who weren't last year and see if they're still struggling as much or if their grades, attendance, and improvement is noted.
okay.
And we've done that in our RTI meetings. We'll invite Ben in, and we'll invite the math emphasis and the ALS teachers in, and we'll look at how those students are doing. So we have data that we're tracking. I think one of the things that has really helped at West, that metamorphosis, even my first year there, teachers were bringing prep work when they would go to CSP up in the library. Now they don't. I mean, they just know they're there, and even if a student is sitting there and not really doing much, then we have a saying, we're going to harass them into learning. And so they'll sit next to them, all right, get your book out. Well, I don't know anything about algebra, but I can read it to you. And so then that just starts the dialogue, and sooner or later, like, well, I might as well do it now, because you're going to harass me until I do it.
Have you had an opportunity to get any parental feedback, particularly from kids who were previously in the alternative school here or the school within a school? Because I would think that would be positive.
Not yet.
but-
We have put together a survey where we were planning on surveying the kids at January, the kids that are assigned on a regular basis at East and West, and kind of a student satisfaction. What do you think? Where could we improve? That kind of thing. But we could certainly put it out to
Okay, well, I
parents
wondered
as
if
well.
maybe that even came out in the review that was done, what was it, 6 years ago, did you say? 3 years ago? The alternative ed review?
It was like 2 years
But anyway,
ago.
okay, okay. So, okay, I think it's really, really, sounds like a really great program. I'll be coming in to visit both of them, but I hope that whatever we need to see to build the resources for this, we can see.
I think one of the places we're
soon.
lacking, and Ben and I have talked about that, we finally got 2 parents coming now to help, I think. So we've enlisted help from parents, and we really have to start reaching out. I've called Wisconsin Lutheran and Mount Mary to try to get some of their students.
Yeah.
And
that's a
it just
good
seems like
idea.
they can't find the times to get there when we need them, but.
Do
so
we
we're trying to-
do we do things with UWM or student
Sure.
teaching and, okay.
Put it on my list, Mary Jo.
Yeah, do that. Thank you. Thanks again.
I'm not understanding how this conversation relates to the 7 versus the 8 period day. It would seem that there are other resource considerations that affect whether we'd want a 7 or 8 period day. And those, of course, would impact this program. But the idea that in and of itself, 7 versus 8 periods would enable or disable the capacity to provide this service, I'm not sure I see that.
You're correct.
Okay.
The point I was making is looking at it from a 6 of 8, as we were saying, either block 3 of 4 or 6 of 8, and then adding the additional hour. If we were to go to an 8 period day and say everybody teaches 5, and then you've got academic resource,
Okay.
there's a significant cost associated
Okay.
with that. But you're right, it is not exclusive.
Okay. There certainly, it comes down to, do you have enough resources to do
Right.
the structure you're proposing? And you have to, okay, that I understand that. Anyone else? Mr. Croner, please.
Thank you. That was a really nice presentation, and thank all of you for coming. This looks like it's a program that has a lot of promise. And I've been thinking about kids that are struggling for a long time and thinking how, as a board, we can support programs that could do a better job with that. And we've had some really good programs, but then I noticed that, only 20 kids can go in that program. And, there's maybe 60 or 80 that need it. And so this looks like a really nice way to reach those kids. So I think we were really onto something here. I had written down here, you touched on it at the end of the last discussion just a moment ago, when someone said English teachers trying to help with algebra, I winced a little bit, because that's like me at home sometimes. And I can say as a parent feedback, I read your presentation over the weekend, and I discovered today that my son was having a rough spot in math. And I said, hey, why don't you go to the resource center? And he goes, I'm going to go there tomorrow. So I know about it. I have to say, I don't know if I knew about it before. So getting parents to maybe communicate a little better with parents so they can encourage their kids to go would be a good thing to do. And I had actually written down here, based on that, staffing and a question mark and student and adult community volunteers as a way to get this going. In my head for a long time, I've developed this volunteer program called Everybody Learns, and it was going to have 2 parts. Everybody reads and everybody counts for reading and math. And it's sort of based off, I know someone that's running a program in MPS where they elicit retirees. They're kind of targeting people 55 and older, but it doesn't have to be that group. People in the community that have particular expertise in areas that you can train if they need some training, and bring them into the schools on a kind of a regular basis where they have a schedule. And so I think maybe if we could think of something like that along those lines, maybe we could have at various times of the day 3 or 4 or 5 people in there helping with science or math, or retired engineers or retired editors, or people that could really help out along those lines. Because I think if we can get the community involved, we could really reach large numbers of kids. And I know I'm going operational on you, but one other idea I had was 0 hours. Is it available 0 hour?
Not at this point.
Okay.
I think that Ms. Roberts is typically arriving about 7:30 and opening it up at that point, but that is sort of one of those extensions to that 7 to 8 and 3:15 to 4 time frame.
I know that's a staffing thing, and my son has a 0 hour, so I know what a stress that can be that early in the morning, and to assign people to those time periods. But for kids that are really busy, taking 7 classes and doing after school stuff, that might be a good time for them. And the other time I thought about were evening hours, and that also is a staffing thing, but maybe using substitute teachers that we know and trust, or community volunteers, or a combination. Students that are really busy maybe they'll come back to school for an hour if they can get help for a quiz the next day or something like that. One other question I had is, I really like where this is going. I think it has a lot of promise. I was worried about kids that, this would probably be a different presentation, kids that come to high school that are maybe 2 or 3 grade levels behind in literacy. If this is appropriate for them, or we have other programs for that. So maybe some other time we can hear about those programs. And we had something that I was really hoping would take off at the middle school year or two ago, and is this something that could reach back to the middle school, that could?
They're doing their version.
But they have a version of this as well?
Mhm.
Okay,
In
good.
fact, I was actually talking to Mr. Galen about 6 o'clock tonight, and they want to go over to East and check out what East is doing, because theirs is run a little bit different. Nick was bragging about how many students were going through there, so Mr. Galen wants to get over there.
We have a large number of kids that come in at lunch, too. They grab their lunch, bring it in, and eat while getting help.
Okay. It sounds like it's, for so early in the program, you're having great success, so hopefully, I think it will take off and be really successful. So thanks for coming.
Anyone else? Yeah, Mrs. Rios, did you have anything more?
No, I was just, well, the one thing I thought I had, and now that you put me on the spot, I'll ask it.
Well, I said it would
Has-
rotate back to you.
Has this reduced the number of students that are seeing individual teachers before and after school? If you understand what I'm asking?
I think it has. I've heard the comment, because I'm on, I deal with the math teachers. And yeah, again, math has always been taxed, whether it's in the ARC or whether it's, a regular
Before,
schedule.
yeah.
And being teachers, yeah, even when you had that one prep hour, yeah, if a kid wants to come to your room or a student wants to come to your room, you're not gonna tell them, or the student knows, hey, Mrs. Kimmel has 5B lunch, I know she's in her room. And the math teachers especially have commented to me that it has reduced the
Mhm.
pressure on them, or the load on them during their one prep or even their lunch hour. With the 5th hour that Mrs. Roberts mentioned, I mean, we have one of our high-level math teachers, our pre-calc teacher is in their 5B. And yes, I call them her groupies. And she'll get 8, 9 kids in there every lunch hour just to come in. I think it has reduced them.
And some departments have made a concerted effort. The foreign language department, the Spanish teachers work well together, so they've made an effort of saying, well, go in and get help during lunch rather than coming during my prep. Because
Right.
there'll be a great teacher in there to help you, and that's all you need.
That's good, yeah.
And I would say reduce is a good word, but you walk the halls after schools, there's
Oh.
still students sitting in classrooms with teachers. And part of that is that we advocate, or tell the students to advocate for themselves and their own learning by working with their classroom teacher. That's where they're getting the instruction for their course, and that's where they're truly gonna get any kind of specific answers to any other questions. So, the majority of things can be handled this way, but nothing beats.
And I think just the goal with East and having students go to the ARC during the day is to not go to the teacher's room during their prep hour. Funnel them towards the ARC. Before and after school, those are probably more specialty questions that
Right.
students might be asking that may require their actual teacher to answer some of those things. So my hope is that funneling students to the ARC will give that period during the day, wherever it may fall, without a student knocking at the door. There will always be some instances where students do, maybe because of the specialty class. But that's probably more, not so much before and after school, but during the day.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Is there any community comment or question on the topic presented? All right, I'm seeing none. Well, thank you very, very much. It was an outstanding presentation for us. All right, well, we'll move to the superintendent's report. Dr. Ertl, can you tell us about the school board elections that are coming up?
I sure can. An election will be held in the Wauwatosa School District on April 1st, 2014, to elect 4 at-large board members serving in numbered seats for the Wauwatosa School Board to serve a 3-year term beginning on the 3rd Monday of April 2014. The present incumbent board members are seat number 4, Mary Jo Randall, seat number 5, Tom Rose, seat number 6, Sharon Muhlfeld, and seat number 7, Carmela Rios. Nomination papers must indicate the numbered seat for which a candidate intends to run. If more than 2 candidates for any numbered seat file nomination papers, a primary election will be held on February 18th, 2014. The first day candidates may circulate nomination papers is December 1st, 2013, and the final day for filing nomination papers is at 5:00 p.m., January 7th, 2014. The deadline for incumbents to file notice of non-candidacy is 5:00 p.m. on December 27th. School board election forms may be downloaded from the Wisconsin State Elections Board website at http://gab.wi.gov.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ertl. Is there any question or comment on this statement? Any community comment or question about this statement? All right. We'll move on to the end of the agenda. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Okay, seeing none. Let's see. Then we'll move to our, did I miss something?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know if you had that.
All right, it's possible, I missed things. So we're gonna move to our executive session portion of the agenda. So may I have a motion to adjourn the regular school board meeting and reconvene in executive session to confer with legal counsel concerning an employee request in accordance with section 19.85, paragraph 1, subparagraph G of the Wisconsin statutes. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Fee, thank you.
Second.
Mrs. Randall, thank you. Mrs. Galante, please call the roll.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. DeRose?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes.
Mrs. Rios?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes, at 8:12, we're adjourned into executive session. We'll take a 5-minute